Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt once again, here today to present the full moon of May 1st, 2026. I am, of course, using Washington, D.C. as our base chart to work from. And today I'm going to a little bit different. I want to point out some things about this chart that we're looking at for Washington, D.C. So even though I'm going to spend the second part of this just really talking about you and how this chart or this, I should say, this full moon affects you at 11 degrees, 20 minutes of Scorpio and Taurus. Scorpio moon, Taurus sun. And we're going to talk about that because it affects everybody regardless of where you live. And we're also going to discuss, as of course, the Aries point, which affects everybody. But that brings me to why I want to discuss Washington today. Sometimes I totally skip it. Today, not so much. So I'm going to talk about, let's look at the wheel, okay? I want to talk about, first of all, the fact that if you check out the wheel, you see that the midheaven is at 15 degrees of Taurus, 19 minutes, which of course puts the sun in the ninth house, which is the house of change, by the way, which I think is really interesting. It's also kind of a political house, but I'm not going to get into that as much. But what I want to point out is that the United States literally has a midheaven that is the Aries point. We, in the Sibley chart, also note that the midheaven is in aspect to the Aries point, but this one's dead on the Aries point. So whatever is happening through this full moon is going to be very visible to the whole world. Now, some of the things I want to talk about, for example, what would we say 11 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio represent? And bear in mind that not only do we have the fixed sun and fixed moon, but realize that we also have a Pluto in a fixed sign. Okay, so the fixed emphasis, Volcanus is also in a fixed sign, but I really want to think about the fact that we're dealing with fixed energy here. And one of the things that we astrologers say about fixed signs is they're the doers. Now, it's a full moon. It's reflective of the new moon that we just had on the 17th of April, and this is for May 1st. But let's talk about this because those things that I just mentioned are strong pressure release qualities, sort of like the tea kettle and how the tea kettle goes off and releases steam. Okay, it's creating a polarity between survival, exposure, control, security, economics, and hidden motives. See, here we're dealing with signs, particularly Taurus, that needs to have stability. The sun demands stability, whereas the moon is saying we have to transform, we have to let go, we have to move on. When they come up together, that it's an indication that nothing can remain the same. Okay? And it's not going to be a quiet full moon. It's interesting because I felt like the breaking point, which was what I called the new moon. This one I'm calling between comfort and unavoidable change. Okay? It's unavoidable. We have to do it. So there's a lot of confrontation that could occur as the chart is telling us we have to deal with reality. We can't put things off. And there could be an exposure of concealed agendas, which will intensify people on an emotional level. And it's also going to reveal that the power struggles in Washington, D.C. are under strain. I think that's putting it mildly. I think that that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of, I'm going to say, for throwing spaghetti at the wall. I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't need to go into anything more. I can tell you that this full moon is arriving at a time when the collective patience has run out. Situations that have lingered beneath the surface now become visible. And this is particularly true because it's a full moon. And what has been denied, hidden, manipulated, or controlled is going to become harder to maintain. So we're looking at some of the emphasis, okay? And this is because of the sun and moon connection in a fixed sign. We have money emphasis, security concerns, fear and control dynamics, financial pressure, institutional trust issues, psychological reactions, hidden motives ultimately become visible. So the Scorpion moon rarely allows avoidance. They force the truth out into the open. And by the way, this would be true if you would be somebody with a Scorpion moon. Okay. So the full moon doesn't avoid anything. And I'm speaking as a Scorpion moon individual. I rarely let things go. I'm always all about the truth and forcing it into the open. So this is definitely something that we can expect. We are resisting change. The fixed energy has twofold. Like you got the Scorpion that says, no, we got to transform. And even Aquarian is a fixed sign, which is Pluto, that says, you know what, we really got to change, okay? But then you go to Taurus, the earth sign, and Leo, they don't want to. Okay, so there's this real dynamic of I want to change, I don't want to change. And I know as an Aquarius, and as a Scorpio moon, know that change is necessary, but I too resist it. Ask Todd how many years he's been trying to get me to move. I don't want to move. It's just the way it is. So we have this entrenched position, a political rigidity, which I think we can all agree on, difficulty compromising, we can all agree, and emotional stubbornness, power struggles galore, which has happened. But something unique has happened with this chart. Okay, and this is really worth talking about. We now have Uranus right here in the 10th house, okay, right in the 10th, talking about change. Okay, it changed signs. It went into Gemini. Now communication is going to be almost like really important because what's going to happen now is information warfare. That's IA's way of putting it, not mine, but I thought perfect. Communication disruptions, expect it. Well, I've suffered that myself because I was days without internet last week. Media fragmentation, you're going to be seeing this. Technology acceleration, I think we're seeing that. Nervous system overload. I don't know anyone who isn't feeling that, whether you follow politics or you don't. We're all very concerned. Public unrest will be driven by messaging. I think that's already started. This placement begins a long cycle where information itself becomes unstable. For Washington, D.C., this often correlates with competitive narratives, competing narratives, contradictory statements, rapid policy changes, public confusion, and sudden announcements. All the stuff they like to do to us. So that's a big factor, okay? So I'm going to start talking about some other things. That's just like the overlay of what I want to talk about. I can tell you that Saturn, Neptune, Aries compression. Okay, so what we're looking at this point is, where are we? Here we are. Okay, see the stellium here of all of this, all right? But we still have Neptune and Saturn, even though they're not really aspecting anymore, but they're still in the same sign and they're actually in the same decant of that sign, okay, which means they're in the same 10 degrees. And basically, unrealistic leadership promises, dissolving structures, ideological fatigue, institutional uncertainty, and loss of confidence in authority. I don't need to say a whole lot about that. Do expect leadership miscalculations. I think this whole thing with this Iran war has been a public frustration, okay? And it has forced consequences on people that they were not ready for. So what's happening is they're trying to have reactions for things. They tend to try to get in front of the messaging, Okay, we've seen it. But let me, for very quick, let's go into, as I always like to do anyway, let's take it to the dial because this is where I'm going to start to show you some real astrology. Okay, the first thing, I want to make sure I got all my notes. Okay, so the first thing I did was I went to the sun. I have a lot of notes on this. And immediately, see the sun and the moon, okay, right across the hour. But what do we have connecting? We have Admetus with Mars. Okay. I mean, that's limited action, people. There's no other way to look at that. I mean, it could be that you're planting seeds right now. And if you're a farmer, that would be what you're doing. If you're, I have a client who is going back to school. I am writing a book. So all of those are seeds that are underground. They're not going to be fruits for a little while because that's how Admetus works. It takes a while, but it can also be overall limited action. There's not a lot you can do. Maybe you're getting blocked. Okay, so the other part of what I saw, I'm going to keep going with this, is we've been dealing a lot with this, okay, which is Volcanus, Pluto opposition. And what happens is a couple things. We have, when we do this, and I think I did it through Pluto, but if you notice, there is this ascendant Jupiter. Like there's a lot of pressure because there's so much expansion. I used to think, well, ascendant Jupiter is so good. Not with Volcanus and Pluto, and I'll give you some heads up here. Okay, so technically, yeah, that would be like happy companions. You know, like, yeah, I'm going to be with these people and they're really great. But if I take away Pluto, which it equals, okay, and then it just goes back up to Volcanus, you can get this you get this that able to readjust oneself to the surroundings. So one of the things that's happening is that we are getting good at our own healing. We're getting good at being able to take care of ourselves. So that part is good, right? And basically, you know, it talks about the people, okay, and healing and all of that. So I know we're going to be okay on this. So I do want to say that. I do think that overall we as people are going to be okay. But I want to show you something else. Okay. As I go through that picture, I come up with Hage Chronos. And what that means literally is bad decisions by people in authorities. Okay? Just, you know, right there. Now, the other thing that I wanted to show here is this midheaven to Saturn and how it equals Mercury. Okay, so this is a really big one too. Not as good news though. Okay, so basically, you know, a lot of us are going to be doing a lot of thinking. And what are we thinking about? We're thinking about money. Okay, we're making a lot of observations, and I have to say that some of this is very educated. Okay, meaning we are going to be able to get out of this, so we're going to be able to work our way around this. I think that's what it comes down to. How do we work our way around this? And that's what this is showing. Okay, now the other one that I looked at. Okay, so I go back to that Volcanus Pluto, which is where I wanted to start in the very beginning. And then I got sidetracked by the ascendant Jupiter. But let's look at this for a moment. This is literally our thinking. And we're going for alternative methods because you see Chiron there. So we have alternative thinking regarding great changes. We're really starting to work it through. We're going to, as people, rise above what we see. Okay? Now, in here, we have a couple of other things. So really cool that we have that there, really cool. But this is telling us a little bit more, okay? And this is telling us that there's going to be a lack of things. Okay, and one of the things, now we already know that there's going to be an oil issue. Okay, that's going to cause some pressure. But you got to look out for other stuff like lack of water, droughts, Okay. We're going to talk about the decline, and the shrinkage of things. Okay. We're going to talk about, um, now, know that they say here narcotics, but realize that there's going to be a problem getting narcotics because the ingredients to make these narcotics are on these boats that we can't get here. Okay? So I had to bring that up. The other thing it is oil. Plain and simple. Okay. So I wanted to go through that one. So here again, let me go back. I've got to find my place. And then we have the one I left till last. Sudden separations, quarrels and disputes, and it's about things going away, maybe people even dying off, okay? But there is a separations that are occurring. And why, you ask? Because of these changes and the pressures caused by Volcanus to Pluto, okay? So when you do Volcanus to Pluto, when you go through that, all you see is mighty changes and transformations. These things are occurring with great speed. It's also referred to as hothouse development, so it's very, very quick, okay? But what it is great changes lead to separations, okay? So the next one I want to look at, I spent a little bit of time on this yesterday, is this Hades Mars. Why not? We have Anatomitas Mars. Why wouldn't we have a Hades Mars, right? Just join the crowd. Whenever you're looking, okay, and again, we're looking at Hades too. We're looking at damages here, okay? As a matter of fact, it's crimes, really. It's sudden attacks, it's serious illnesses, it's mean acts, it's damage, it's base service, it's atrocities, okay? And um, it refers to, again, if you're planting seeds and you're a farmer, that's a good use of this energy, okay? But it also brings on a lot of weariness and fatigue, whereas if you are a farmer, that would make perfect sense, okay? And I'm going to do this. I'm going to take Uranus off. And it comes up with suicide, murder, again, activities producing excitement or damage, and damages that can cause death, also known as war atrocities. Can't make this stuff up, guys. Okay. Now, as I go back, I want to go back here. And if I take this again, we go back to our damages, unless you're a farmer, good use of energy if you are, we're going to actually take off this guy. Okay. To gather with many lowbrow people, okay, or it's soldiers. See, it's all about the war, okay? It can also be trade activities, but part of what the war is inhibiting is trade activities, and it's failing in activities related to commerce, okay? So I thought to myself, wow, this is really telling. And we're only going through the uranium part. And this is, again, really Washington, D.C., though, like, for example, the rest of the world does not necessarily have a Volcanus equaling the sun of Volcanus midheaven. All right. And it's about power and authority. Okay. So as I'm going through this, I'm going, oh, ascendant, Mercury, Chiron, it's like the news is causing us to look at things different. Young people in particular will look at things differently. If I go to that Uranus, the first thing that shows up is this Neptune Cupido right here. Okay. Now, there's so much more I could say, but I'm going to just talk about these midpoints for a second. And when you go to that midpoint, because it equals our ascendant, this is the, how do I say this? This is you and me and anyone who lives in this country dealing with Washington, D.C. We're unhappy. There's a shortage. There's shortages of housing. We've been dealing a lot with the unhoused right now. There's disharmony in communities and community associations. Doesn't that go with everything we've already talked about? And there's secretiveness. in these groups and organizations. So I had to bring that up because I just thought, wow, that's really good. I mean, that's really what's going on here. And I just want to stay with this for one more minute before we jump into the other parts of what I'm doing. I want to talk about two things in the DC chart before we move forward, and that is the ascendant and then the midheaven. Okay. So we have two spots on the chart. And you see the midheaven is right there at the Aries point. Otherwise, not pulling up a whole lot. Not a lot of, well, Venus, money, okay, and our relationships, okay? But otherwise doesn't pull in a lot. So we're going to look at the ascendant and, oh, sorry, I don't want that one. I want this one. The ascendant and, which brings in Neptune. Can you, oh, and Mercury. Can you believe anything that's being told to you? Can we believe anything the paid press is telling you? Because we only have a state press on television. I mean, you got to go to the social media for the independent press. But it's like, no, you cannot. We're being lied to and deceived on a regular basis. Why? Because of money. No shocker there. So let's look at this. We have a 3-degree Pisces ascendant, which really suggests an emotional atmosphere of confusion, uncertainty, and projection. Now remember that the ascendant itself is ruled by Neptune because it's in Pisces. So the United States this month has an ascendant ruled by Neptune. So you're going to see things like narrative control, emotional response over logic, public uncertainty, misinformation or blurred perception, symbolic events. So Pisces rising often reflects a public that senses something is wrong but struggles to identify exactly what that is. Boy, are we there. So I wanted to bring up that. My next one is just the midheaven, which is collectively visible directly into Taurus themes. Okay, so here we go with money and food and, you know, especially food, because that's going to be the big issue when things can't be transported due to the high prices of gas and oil. And not to mention the products that will be hard to get because they're made with oil. Okay, so what will become visible through this midheaven? This is the United States, though I would imagine it's affecting the whole world in a similar way. Economic concerns, banking systems. I've heard a lot about banking systems. Be very, very careful of what you have in the bank too. You know, make sure you're keeping track of it. Financial leadership, material security, agriculture or supply concerns. Taurus, we're supposed to be planting. We've got no fertilizer. Okay. Questions about stability and value. Yeah, we're all worried about a recession or depression or something worse. Because the midheaven sits in Taurus, what the public sees relates to tangible reality. In other words, we don't care about what's happening on the other side of the world that doesn't really affect us. We care about, can we afford to feed our families? Can we afford to drive or fly on vacation? Okay, this full moon is asking us what systems still provide in terms of stability and what systems no longer work. Okay, so there's going to be a real, because of the Aquarius, there's a real shift in our deep collective. Okay, and you know, we'll talk about that. I've already mentioned a lot of it. It's like government restructuring, a public rebellion, technology power struggles. Again, we're seeing a lot of this already. Control of information, collective polarization. Well, have you heard? I mean, I'm a Democrat and I am really sick and tired of being blamed for everything and the names they call us, and then having people have the nerve to tell the left to stop. What? The left isn't doing anything but responding to the awful treatment we're getting from the right. So I really think, and again, group identity crisis. I think we got to stop with these parties and this political partisan crap and become more of coalition oriented like they are in the rest of the world. Pluto in Aquarius is not a quiet place, and it's going to bring a lot of changes over the next 20 years. Big, big. We won't recognize the world in 20 years. I may not be here to see that, but or I might, I don't know. It's, I'll be up there. But, it's one of those things that it's going to happen. Okay, so you got Venus in Aries, and most of the time you think, and we showed Venus, okay? We showed how close Venus is when you put it to the midheaven, okay? We've seen Venus is related to the Apollon Cupido, okay? So the expansion of groups or the expansion of families, but look at the connection it has to Neptune. Lies, lies, lies. Okay, so we're going to see a lot of, and by the way, in Aries, she's more of a warrior than she is. Ah, I'm just going to share that with you too. So you'll see a lot of relationship shifts. People are going to fight back, and that's within their own relationships. Financial impulsivity, desire-driven decisions, political alliances, and they're shifting. You're going to see Republicans not going the Republican way, which already started. Emotional impatience, and it's because this Venus is very impatient. Okay. I'm with somebody who has this, and boy, we always laugh at him. We really, make him know that he's impatient. Okay. Because of the Mars position, there's a tendency to be much more emotional and reactive rather than logical. So people will be emotionally defensive. And it also is about homeland concerns, family and security issues. I already went through a lot of this. So, this is something that has already, like a lot of what I'm talking about has already become, like, for example, the economic concern becoming global. Yeah, you think. Okay. Things already in motion. And at this point, it becomes impossible to ignore them. Um, we're also going to be exposed to hidden motives, which I think will be very educational. Although I think it'll also be a little bit. Okay. So basically, what we're doing is this full moon exposes what has already been reached. We call that a breaking point. That's why my last one was called the breaking point. Taurus wants security. Security demands truth. Scorpio demands truth. Together, they will reveal where stability has become an illusion. Okay. So moving on. So we know that emotionally, it's going to be the fear versus truth. But remember that fear is one of the things we're learning to overcome here. So go for the truth and don't worry about the fear. Have more faith. There's going to be a lot of collective frustration, and I think we're seeing it, and a lot of pressure, which we are also seeing. Okay. So basically, that gets me all the way down to the collapse of an illusion. That's really what's going on here. Okay. Public revelations, collapse of an illusion, and again, hidden motivation becoming visible. Okay. And then, as you know, I went with that title. So I am at this point just going to make sure that I have talked about everything I want to at this point. Okay, before I move to my next chart, there's a lot of government and public visibility is going to be really important. I think the fact that they need to be more transparent will be becoming an issue. And so I'm going to now move to the next area of our charts. And so let me go and take care of that. And let's go look at the wheel with the asteroids. And we're going to be mostly working with the midpoints and the asteroids as usual. So I'm back, and we have before us the actual chart that we were looking at, only now we have all my stuff in there. So, of course, I'm not going to really go through a whole lot here. I do want to talk about, since I did talk about the ascendant and the midheaven, but as you can see, it's really crowded, especially that midheaven. Oh, my Lord, it's just really, really crowded to the point where, here's their food issues. They're in there. Here is this is Lilith is up here too. So, um, and logic is up there. So we're going to try to be logical about the choices we have before us. And here we're going to be looking at people that we depend on, particularly within our partnerships, and how that has affected us as people. Okay, so we're going to be looking at so that so we have Eurydice, we have Academia, and we have Hera, well, sort of like Juno. And basically, it's saying like the dependency on partners, and we're learning. Are we learning from them or about them? And this is just something to consider because that's right there on that ascendant. So now I'm going to take it, I'm going to switch it to the 90 as I do. And we're going to begin, first of all, as I like to begin, with the sun moon lineup. Oops, I keep doing that. It's by minute. So we're going to look at the axis of the sun and the moon. And I think it's actually 20. So let me go check that because I don't think it's 10. I think it's 20. It is 20. So let me get my 20. Let's move up to 20. There we are. Okay, so this is exactly where we want to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the midpoints that we see, and we're going to talk about the asteroids that fall here. Okay, so this is one axis, and then our second axis, I did have this all written down. So our second axis, so we have 26 beautiful, again 20, 26, 20, and 11, 20. And then we go to the second axis is 350, which does equal, Astrea still be there, and the trans-Pluto. And also note Jupiter, okay? So it's 1850. Jupiter's over here, okay? So that's the axis we're going to work with. We're going to work with the midpoints, and we're going to work with the asteroids that fall in that axis points, okay? And a couple of things, like we're going to talk about Jupiter by itself, and we're going to talk about Astrea by itself, because this particular sun-moon axis equals those points. So starting with Astrea. Astrea, okay, is a repeat. It's like what you see. Okay, we'll start with that. Like and as the quick. But it's directly on the axis, strengthens the justice theme. It's like we're witnessing something. The full moon carries the question, what is fair, what is lawful, what needs correction, and what can no longer be ignored. Okay? So now that's going to be a part of this sun-moon axis. And again, this is regardless of where you live. So things that we're going to be looking at as the midpoint proceeds. Aries Juno, which places public visibility around contracts, agreements, alliances, political commitments, and partnership obligations. We just talked about that at the ascendant of this chart. Juno can show loyalty issues, broken agreements, or the need to define who is bound to who. Sounds very familiar, which is one of the reasons I wanted to go through those asteroids in particular. We also have an ascendant Mercury, and we have a Pallas Pluto. So I'm going to start with Pallas Pluto. This is a strategic power. Pallas is also politics, okay? But it brings planning, pattern recognition, intelligence, and political strategy. Pluto intensifies it. Together, they can show deep strategic maneuvering, power plays, or the exposure of a calculated plan. Sound familiar? We've all been talking about this. Now, along with that, we also have this ascendant Mercury. So we're going to start with the, continue with our ascendant Mercury. This is about the public environment because of the ascendant, and it deals with informational and reactive communications. Statements, documents, announcements, media, and messaging really drive this full moon. And the other thing is Jupiter, which is, I said we would do this, sits directly in the axis, expands everything. It magnifies the full moon. It also brings legal, judicial, political, religious, international, and financial themes into the center of the chart. So here again, we think, oh, Jupiter, that'll be good. And for some people, it will, because it'll present opportunities. But realize, and I've always said this, Jupiter is also legal. Jupiter is also political. So there's a couple things in there. Now, I'm going to go on here, but and we'll go back to the summaries, but we have things like Zeus Admetus, okay, which pushes for action, direction, desire, and it's like an ignition. Admetus tends to compress, delay, block, and concentrate pressure. Together, this picture shows pressure building behind a fixed objective. It often describes restrained force, something waiting to move, but unable to remain contained forever. So the interesting thing is we already talked about this. We talked about it when I was going through the other Uranian chart. With the ascendant Sirius, we're seeing things like the environment becomes focused on protection, caregiving, resources, food, women, land, or we have land things going on, and collective survival needs. Public attention turns toward that which the people require in order to feel safe. So there's a real reaction to security, emotional reaction to basic needs, and resource protect. We want our resources protected. We don't want them sold off to foreign entities, which is what they're trying to do. With the Sun Sirius and Moon Sirius, there's a reinforcement of this Sirius, okay? So the full moon becomes deeply tied to things like nutrition, survival, emotional security, because these are all Sirius, okay? And the population's need for stability in order to have better economics. So economics will be concerned, food and supply issues, which we talked about, public reaction to emotional safety, and protective instincts will ultimately become stronger. With the Juno ascendant, which we were looking at, we're talking about partnerships, agreements, political alliances, obligations move into the public view. And this would be things like public contracts. Okay. Then we move on, and let me go back to the summation of those, okay, is here. The Sun-Moon axis shows full moon that exposes pressure within groups, alliances, legal structures, and public agreements. Mars node, which we also had, brings conflict involving people or fractions. Jupiter and Australia, which also are there, emphasize the judgment, the law, and correction. Pluto Poseidon suggests that the truth is being forced through a deeper transformation of belief or ideology. And the Pallas Pluto adds strategic power, while the ascendant Mercury shows the words, media, documents, and public messaging, which ultimately becomes central. This full moon is where the public sees strategy behind the pressures. So we sort of tend to see what is going on within the environment in DC, because that's what we're concerned with. And so that's what this is relating to. Before I get to the asteroids, I just want to give one more closing statement on the Sun-Moon midpoints, which, again, the full moon does not create the pressure. It reveals where the pressure has been already building. And Taurus wants security. And so, again, as I've said before, Scorpio is about the honesty. So all of this becomes very impossible for us to ignore as people here. Now, the next part of what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the asteroids that fall here. I'm going to go through them rather quickly because there's pretty many in the Sun-Moon axis. Okay, we have Barlow, we have Persephone, we have Lilith, Chase, Sirius, Jupiter, Sheldon, Williams, Escapula, Eros, Finney, Vipera, Ransom, Meyer, Diana, Bourne, Astrea, Wynn, Lacrimosa, and Walker. So we have quite a list here. So I'm going to bring this this work here, try to kind of move everything together so we're not, now I have to find it. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of interpretation. I'm going to kind of put them together because I think that'll make it easier for us to deal with these asteroids, which is, again, quite a list. And I've lost it. As I've gone through the list, because AI kind of messed up, which AI does, I forgot some of these asteroids. So I read off a list to you, but that list was only half done. So Vipera, retrograde, Ransom, retrograde, Myers, Diana, Bourne, Astrea, Wynn, Lacrimosa, Walker, and Icarus should also be added to that rather long list we just looked at. So I'm going to go through each of these for us really briefly as I get all my paperwork in order here. Okay, because I did go all the way through that list. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I'm going to start talking about these asteroids. Like, for example, Barlow. Okay, this is something that's connected to social reputation, identity within a system, or recognition through public circumstances. Barlow can be described as becoming known through events. Persephone carries a theme of descent, transition, powerlessness, and hidden cycles. Okay, and so Persephone in the full moon cycle actually becomes especially powerful because these are themes that relate to forced change, psychological descent, loss of innocence, hidden emotional cycles, and becoming aware of just what was buried. Lilith exposes rejection, inclusion, taboo, refusal, and emotional independence. Okay. With that, there's a refusal to comply. There's an emotional anger, feminine rage, hidden resentment, repressed truth now surfaces. And this is all related to Lilith, which is again intensified in a Scorpion full moon atmosphere. Chase is an asteroid of pursuit, but it's also about pressure and urgency and being forced to follow events already in motion. With Chase, you get escalations, you get public pursuits, and it's about running toward or away from consequences. Circe is about enchantment, illusion, seduction, manipulation, and altered perceptions. So here, now, I also want to point out that this is more of the AI, but I want to talk about what I look at Circe. Circe is also getting help in the 11th hour. It is when you're in a situation that seems absolutely like it's not going to work out, and then just like grace from God, somebody comes in and really helps you out. So I'm not so sure how much I agree with this Circe. Okay, Sheldon is about body images, okay? But it can also relate to intellectual processing and observations, generally detached, okay? So it's like an energy that is rather detached. Now, as we move on, we have things, and by the way, am I at 15? No, this one. There we go. Okay, so one of the things that we have to be aware of is that Williams, which is our next one, is about self-destructive actions. Okay, we have to be really careful of being unhealthy in terms of how we're handling situations, whether it's unhealthy toward us or in some ways it's related to a emotional self-sabotage. Okay, a scapula is about medicine. Okay, it's about healing. It's intervention and repair, okay? Things that need correction, particularly in medical or public health themes. Eros, which can be about the heart, by the way, because that's also, and also reproductive organs. So not only do we have a health asteroid, but next with an Eros, which means these two things. But Eros also intensifies attraction, desire, and emotional attachments. Okay, so this is like where people get a little bit obsessive um, and emotionally intense because instead of being logical, they tend to be psychologically driven. Fini is endings. It's just the endings. It's a completion. It's a recognition that something has reached the stage of closure, endings. It's over, finality. Okay, Vipera, which is retrograde, suggests poison, toxicity, hidden threats, betrayal, or subtle danger. Okay, so think of things that are hidden that are toxic. And it can also relate to emotional poisoning, and it's really a dangerous influence overall. Ransom in retrograde. Oh, and by the way, when that's Vipera is retrograde, it actually enhances um, uh, things that are hidden, internal or hidden. So it kind of another thing that kind of brings that up. So here we carries the theme of exchange, payment, consequences, and emotional cost. And this is like everything has a price. No matter what you do, it has a price. Something that we all realize. In some cases, it's hidden debt. Sometimes it's sacrifice. So it's a cost attached to action. In a retrograde, it's talking about unresolved consequences. Well, we only have to look at a war. Myers in this situation is often linked to psychological profile analysis, personality themes, or behavior. So it's about understanding of motives, it's about personalities and exposure, and it's about emotional recognition, pattern recognition. Diana, which is animals, wild animals too, also carries an independent streak. Okay, there's a self protection here and instinct. Okay, so it talks about self preservation, emotional boundaries, and even withdrawal from unhealthy situations in order to find more independence. Born is like our ascendants, but it also suggests an emergence, a creation, a beginning, something. And I talked about that. So we talked about it with regards to seeds that are being planted, but it is about the birth of awareness. It's about a public awakening and something that's renewed. Astrea, what we see, what we see. Justice, judgment, correction, legal balance, and truth. It's about moral corrections. Okay. It's the way this works. Make sure I'm on the right page. Is about the moral, what's moral, what's not moral. Okay, there we go. I'm always like, all my pages are all messed up. Okay. Now we're looking at, oh, and by the way, fairness themes. When you're in Australia, there is a sense of like looking for, things that are fair. And the legal consequences and public judgment fall into that too. Win is about observation, distance, scientific viewpoint, or seeing from a detached perspective. So to win, public observation, standing outside of your emotional reaction. It also relates to winning. So for some people, it could relate to, especially if you had a nice Jupiter, it could be an opportunity and an ability to view it, even that opportunity, very objectively. Lacrimosa suggests tears, grief, sorrow, mourning, but it's the emotional release. It's also emotional mourning on a collective grief level. So sadness is becoming visible. People are sad. There's release through emotion, especially with them taking of our neighbors, the way they're literally treating people. There's a lot of stuff that's affecting us. Movement, Walker is about movement. It's about moving forward. It's also public travel, which I brought up earlier, continuation or carrying something forward. It's about that transition, movement after exposure, and continuing despite difficulty. Icarus, on the other hand, warns of overreach and the ego. And it relates to inflated ambition. It's like, they always that saying with Icarus, flew too close to the sun. It's risk taking that definitely moves too close to danger. And its themes include hubris, overconfidence, failure by excess, and ignoring the limits. Machiavelli, which is our final one here, is about power, strategy, manipulation, political calculations, hidden motives, and control. Remember, to be Machiavellian is to be a little bit cunning, lack of transparency, and here we're talking about particularly political maneuvering. Okay, so all of those asteroids, even though we flew by them, really relate to everything we've already discussed when I was looking at the Uranian pizza pie chart and then the 360 dial. It's like reinforcement of that energy. So we're going to look at next is the Aries point, and our two angles are, our first angle, okay, look how close that midheaven is, and then our second one would be about there. Oh, a little bit less. Okay, just to get the idea that we're going to go through not as many asteroids in this, ironically, but a little bit more in terms of the midpoints. Okay, so here we have an ascendant Volcanus, which puts a tremendous force into the environment because Volcanus is that force and the ascendant is the environment. Cupido and Volcanus is talking about the pressure within organizations, groups, and even within families. This could be collective structures that ultimately gain power, but it's really about how people gather together. So it's a strong collective identity, and it relates to group influence. It can also show that there are groups, organized power structures that are working behind the scenes, which has been a theme. Venus in the nodes relates to our relationships, our alliances, our economics, our diplomacy, our social agreements. And these are really important because it relates to financial ties, social cohesion or division, and relationship themes that affect the public. Okay, so like our economic partners. It relates to public diplomacy too, or lack thereof. Venus node also describes connections, but also dependencies. So in the axes, okay, so I'm going to continue on. I'll come back to that. So in the axes, okay, we also have a moon Neptune. This creates emotional confusion. We talked about this: projection, fantasy, uncertainty, and emotional vulnerability. It's like an emotional fog. And it makes the whole public really uncertain. And there's a lot of fear that can be amplified through emotion. So that's why I say, no fear, have faith. We will be fine. Okay. With the sun, with Neptune, it affects leadership, visibility, and identity. Okay. So there is an uncertainty about our leadership. I do not think our leadership is well. I don't think a lot of people think the leadership is well. It refers to a disillusionment that's public and symbolic leadership themes, but there's a lot of confusion around authority, and it often reveals where image and reality no longer match. Saturn-Pluto is one of the strongest pressure combinations, and it refers to heavy pressure, structural collapses, institutional stretch, power structures, forced restructuring, and extreme control dynamics. Yeah, anytime you put those two together, right? Saturn and Pluto rarely operate lightly. It often signals periods where systems become difficult to sustain in their current form. Okay, so it does talk about how Volcanus combinations intensify our environment, while Venus node shows the alliances and the economics and the social relationships. But it really is talking about how this is being very public through pressure. We just saw King Charles is here, and oh, yeah, that's all I'm saying. And the visible strain placed on systems trying to maintain their own stability. Okay, so some of the stuff that these points are talking about, here we go. All right, it's a highly visible through collective pressure. So everything going on is going to be very visible, including the pressure. So it suggests compressed force waiting for release. Sirius repeatedly throughout the axis shows us concerns with food, resources, protection, emotional safety, and preservation. With the Neptunes, it creates uncertainty surrounding leadership, public emotion, messaging, and it adds to institutional pressure. Okay. and deep restructuring. Okay, so that we've already been talking about. Okay, so the main themes, let me just make sure I got through all of this. Yeah, the main themes here. We go back to the Zeus Adamitas, which I've talked in depth about in this time, and how very frustrating it can be to reach our thresholds. It's the building of pressure behind a fixed situation. And so it really is. Again, we're going to be really focusing on food, survival, and this is even in, so we got it for both axes, okay? So in this axis, in this axis, okay, as a matter of fact, there we go. I'm going to talk about all this. And we also have it with Cirrus, which I believe is in this one. Wrong way, Colleen. So you can see where I'm talking. Okay, here we go. I've got 2 more minutes to go, but there you go. Okay, so I'm gonna go through this. So constantly you see Cirrus throughout this whole thing, and it's really tied to our survival, especially food. Okay, and it's tied to emotions as well as to what's really going on, because the sun is our will, but our emotional security is totally tied into that moon. With we already talked about the Juno ascendant. It keeps coming up. We talked about the Neptune moon. I'm going to be skipping through because we've done some of these, okay? And we went through all of that. Okay. Now, just the midpoints. So the summary, just the midpoints, is that it reveals a highly visible through collective pressure, a compressed force waiting to be released. With Cirrus, we see that continued pressure about food. And again, we're talking about a lot of public insecurity and uncertainty, whether it's the leader or it's what's going to happen in our lives. Okay? Now, moving on to the very last section. Yes, we're going to look at now there's not as many, but we're going to look at the asteroids that fell into the Aries point, which are the 2 points that I've been talking about. Calypso, which is concealment, seduction, isolation, and even emotional entrapment. Yeah, because you don't really know everything, right? So you're emotionally going to be trapped. Savo can suggest preservation, cultural identity, continuity, or belonging to a larger social structure. It's also related to group memory, social attachment, save your money, save your food. Okay? It relates directly to save as well. Laverna is strongly associated with deception, theft, lies, manipulation, and the concealment of wrongdoing. So look for the false narratives, the hidden agendas, the deception within the systems, and manipulation behind appearances. Sounds like some of the other stuff we've been reading. Okay? Because when Laverne is in the Aries point, it becomes a public deception. Schlecht translate as bad, wrong, or unhealthy. So this is a recognition of what's broken, what is no longer working, the dysfunction, the toxic patterning, or the toxic patterns, and the awareness that things are not working. Blarney is lies. It suggests persuasion, charm, exaggeration, storytelling, rhetoric, and most particularly, that's right, spin. Okay? And this is going to be really found in political language, narrative shaping, and public relations tactics. It really works with Neptune. Okay, we saw a lot of Neptune in this chart. Okay, like if I go back over here to the 2230, it immediately brings up, and that's not even the 30. Let's go to the 30. But look at the Neptune and the moon, Neptune and the sun. You see it is right there in the middle of this whole thing. Okay. Pythia is the oracle of prophecy, intuition, and symbolic truth, or messages that emerge through indirect means. But it does relate to perception, symbolic warnings, intuitive awareness, and public sense of future outcomes. Now, What Pythia also does is your intuition's great, but somehow things do not end up the way you thought they would. Do keep that in mind. Dynasties brings emotional release, but it brings things like intoxication, excess, liberation, ecstasy, or social breakdown or restraint. Okay, now, one of the things that we do deal with, particularly in this country, is a cabinet of people who abuse drugs and alcohol. That's common knowledge. I'm not saying anything too scandalous because it's a fact. Okay. And with dynasties, it means that it also amplifies our full moon. So, for example, if you're somebody who drinks and you get drunk during the Scorpio full moon, you are very likely to amplify your emotions. That's one good example. Same thing with drugs. So right now, be careful of that excess. Be very careful because you will not have rational thought when in a in the fog of whatever that is, and that also is ruled by things like Neptune. Loony strengthens this lunar theme because loony is loony, okay? But it again refers to that emotional visibility, the fact that things are so emotional that the public will respond emotionally. So it's really, and it heightens instinctive reactions. So loony does make us extremely sensitive because lunatics are extremely sensitive. That's part of what makes them the way that they are. Cupido retrograde is an asteroid, by the way. I'm not talking about Cupido. We talked about that earlier. This is the asteroid, Cupido, which very much reads the same. So it's still like we're dealing with groups, social structures. We're still dealing with all of that. And in retrograde, it's a review or a reconsideration about how do these things work? How does this group manage it? Okay, because you might not like what you see. Okay, Taureau retrograde intensifies force, impact, stubbornness, and confrontation. We have a bully in the White House. We have a bully as a defense secretary. So we're looking at Taureau. Bully, 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 bully. It's aggressive pressure, collective stubbornness, and it's like a power-seeking thing, right? Retrograde, it internalizes pressure before external expression, which means all of these bullies are acting out because some other things are not going well for them. Karma is retrograde, but it indicates consequence, repetition, unfinished cycles, and accountability. Okay? Public consequence. That's how it ends up. Collective accountability. So its retrograde suggests that there's karmic material that's actually coming from the past. Why gotta? Why God me? That's what it really means. Why? Why do we have to go through this? Okay. But it does carry themes of comfort, ease, complacency, or the desire to remain comfortable. Sure. We're all shook up right now. And everybody wants to go back to the way it was. Not me. I want to destroy that system because we end up here if we go back. We just come back here again. And so the understanding is that we've got to rebuild, start over, and restructure. And we will. So retrograde here suggests disrupting old comfort zones. Well, that's really going on. Varda is associated with the truth, the light, the perception, and the revelation. I always like this one. My saying for Varda, the truth that sets us free. But it is retrograde. In retrograde form, it is still very illuminating. It is about the public truth, and it's seeing clearly what is going on. So it's a revelation through exposure. So here, retrograde can suggest the truth is emerging slowly or both is going to occur after denial. Nemesis represents consequence, correction, reversal, justice, and the balancing out of excess. Nemesis is also blame, the blame game, okay? We want to point the blame at somebody else. We want to, but with this nemesis, you got to understand that somewhere, somehow, something has gone too far. Now we want accountability. That's where the blame comes in. And the downfall happens because of imbalance. It is about public correction and consequences that will then become visible. Veratus, truth again. I love all this truth, by the way. Here we have disclosure, honest revelation, public clarity, exposure of hidden facts. So it reinforces that need to reveal that is very strong in the theme of this full moon chart. Johnson is suggestibility. Okay, false memory, interrogation, persuasion, or psychological influence. It's being manipulated, people. Okay, like the Machiavellian energy. Okay, but now it's Judson. And it's public doubt, questions about truthfulness, manipulative narratives, and psychological persuasion. Judson can indicate public uncertainty about what are we supposed to believe? Huh, I can't imagine that's already happening. So there's a lot of in this axis that strongly supports the idea of exposure. It refers to deception and the consequences of that deception and the collective realization. So there's been a lot of manipulation of narrative and uncertainty around the truth. All of this is being exposed. Schleck shows recognition that something unhealthy can no longer be ignored. While Pythia and Varda bring revolution, intuition, and symbolic truths, Karma and Nemesis reinforce that accountability. Veratus insists on disclosure. Taureau intensifies that pressure. That's where you see people becoming real bullies. And Dionysus, I always say that wrong, amplifies emotional release. So here we go again. The more they become bullies, the more they become drunks and drug addicts. And Cupido retrograde questions how much institution and collective structures actually function. So I'm going to leave it there. I think there's a lot in this one. Hopefully this video is not too long. But I, as always, want to thank you for watching this video. If you would comment, I'd love to hear from you. I don't have SEO, so I don't have to harp on that stuff. But I do love the comments. And I also want to say, as I always say to end the video, I wish you all only happy readings. I hope for everyone that the Jupiter indicates opportunities and that the Zeus with the Adamitas is the planting of seeds of those opportunities. Thank you.